For today's video, I'm going to take you step by step through my process for painting this lovely drinking zebra using only 4 paint colors, and you'll be delighted to discover that the reflection on the water is actually the easiest part of this painting. So let's jump in. My paint colors today are Holbein Yellow Ochre and Daniel Smith Indigo, Burnt Umber, and Burnt Sienna. I have a porcelain palette and a water jar and 3 different round brushes. Check out the description below for a complete list of the supplies used in this video. For best results, you're going to want to use 100% cotton watercolor paper. I'm using Arch's 140-pound cold pressed. I'm going to start with the wet and wet technique, just using clean water and brushing it all over the body of the zebra. You'll notice that I'm extending the water even beyond my pencil lines. The reason for that is that we're going to let the color blur out into the background, creating some interesting background effects with this wet and wet technique. The first color I'm using is Yellow Ochre, and I'm just shading in the darker areas of the zebra's body. Whenever you're painting a white animal that has stripes or some sort of pattern on it, you want to start with the base colors, imagining as if the zebra was just completely white and sculptural. So we're still just looking at values right now, trying to paint the darkest values in this yellow ochre shade. You can see how I extended that yellow ochre beyond the body of the zebra, creating this beautiful ethereal effect surrounding the zebra. Going darker into the legs, I'm adding in some burnt umber and a little bit of indigo to create a dark gray. These legs in the front are definitely in shadow, so we want to make sure the values are correct here. So I'm just using a combination of indigo, burnt umber, yellow ochre, and a little bit of my burnt sienna to create a darker cast on those front legs. And then I'm also shading underneath the neck, outlining that muscle along the neck, and just softening that edge using a clean, damp brush. Within the white stripes on the neck, I'm adding some dark yellow ochre in the mane, just to indicate where the white areas of the mane will be. And you can see that the neck has this almost cylindrical look because we left a white highlight along the length of the neck. I'm darkening in the face and in the ears, just using my burnt umber. A little bit of yellow ochre, burnt umber, and burnt sienna. And along the front of the nose, I'm adding a little more yellow ochre. Now for the muzzle, I'm starting with a base wash of pure burnt umber, slightly watered down, and just avoiding a couple highlights around the nostril. And then I'm going over that while it's still wet with indigo, which is creating a nice dark black for the nose. You'll notice I painted around those nostrils again and then just filled them in with one more layer of burnt umber. The legs need to go darker still. You might notice that as your watercolor dries, it starts to look lighter than your initial wash. So you can go back in once it's completely dry and add another layer just to darken it up. Always be checking your values, double checking and making sure that those are correct before you go in with the stripes. I'm adding one more layer of color along the neck, just making it look more three-dimensional and rounded. On the muzzle, I see more of a bluish tint, so I'm adding some indigo watered down around the head and sharpening up some of those details in the shadows. Now for the stripes. I've mixed up some black using rich burnt umber and indigo, and I'm starting the meticulous process of painting the stripes. Now I want the stripes in the very back and the rear of the animal to kind of blend out a little bit, so I'm wetting that area and then touching my black paint right up to the wet paper, and you can see that it's blending out and bleeding nicely. Now it's easy to get lost in all of these details, so sometimes it's helpful to have a printout in the exact same size of your painting so that you can hold it really close to your painting and be able to glance back and forth quickly between your reference photo and your artwork, and that makes it a little easier to see those details so that you don't get lost. If you do find that you're getting lost and having a hard time keeping track of all of those stripes, just find a section, for example, the center point of the back, or somewhere where you know the details are right, where you can get the drawing right, and just start from there. It just takes one correct decision at a time to get all of those stripes perfectly formed. You'll notice that the center line is interesting. It's almost like the stem of a tree branch, and the stripes coming out are like the leaves coming from the stem. That should help give you an idea of the symmetry. So you want the stripes, the black stripes, to be touching each other in the center. Really take your time here. Use a small enough brush so that you can paint these little details with confidence. I'm using my Silver Black Velvet size 4 round brush for the stripes. The stripes took me the longest for sure on this painting. Something else to keep in mind when you're painting the stripes is that they will move and curve around the anatomy of the animal. So always be checking your drawing. Now for the stripes on the neck, remember we left a strong highlight on the zebra's neck, and we're going to do the same thing with the stripes. So start with dark black paint at the very top of the stripe and at the bottom, but leave a tiny section within each stripe white. And once you've completed the dark paint on the stripe, dip your brush in water, dab it on the paper towel so that your paint is slightly watered down, and then fill in that section with the watered down black paint. And you can see it looks much lighter and shinier in the section where we watered down the paint. So continue this process all the way down the length of the neck, painting blacker towards the mane and around towards the bottom of each stripe, and then filling in that section at the top that's in the light with a watered down version of your black paint. You can see this really adds a beautiful detail to the zebra and makes it much more realistic and 3D looking. You can finish the mane using short, quick brush strokes and your black paint. You'll see that that black stretches all the way across the top of the mane. If you notice that your values are still not dark enough in the shadow shapes, you can add some more dimension to those even after you've done the stripes. You can add in the details in the ears using your black mixture, sticking with a small brush here, and for added texture, use the dry brush method where you gently scrape your brush across the surface of the paper. Before we go to the next part of the video, I just want to let you guys know that this tutorial is available in real time. Just head over to emilyolsonart.com where you can access all of my fully narrated real-time tutorials for just a small amount per month. I also include a sketch and reference photo with those tutorials, as well as a list of all the supplies I use so that you can follow the exact steps to paint along with me. With the Fearless Artist membership, you have access to my Watercolor Jumpstart video course, which is the perfect place to start if you're brand new to watercolor. There's also a series of 20-minute tutorials that will help sharpen your skills and give you delightful, frame-worthy little wins in your watercolor journey. And join our private Facebook group where you can share all of your amazing artwork and get feedback from other artists. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can see all the tutorials that are currently available, and I'm adding more every month. All right, let's get back to the video. Now, before we finish the zebra, we're going to use masking fluid to block out the water shape. So I have my Schminke masking fluid here that's in a pen form, and all you have to do is gently squeeze it out the tip, and I'm simply outlining the entire shape of the reflection using my masking fluid. You don't have to worry about this being perfect. Just use squiggly lines all around the edge, and try to follow your reflection in your reference photo, roughly, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it looks like it's squiggly and horizontal like the shape of the water, it will look really cool. I'm also adding dots of the masking fluid inside of the reflection where I see lighter values that I want to avoid with the dark paint later. Once your masking fluid is dry, you can continue working on your painting. I'm mixing up some more black, and I'm going to finish painting the zebra's head. For the eye, I'm carefully avoiding some of those eyelashes inside of the eye, but filling the rest of it in black. The stripes on the head are so tiny, so I've switched to my size 2 Raphael Soft Aqua brush. This is my smallest brush, and it works really well for creating these tiny, slender stripes on the head. Try to complete each stripe in one long swooping brush stroke if you can. Work slowly and allow your hand to rest on your dry paper. When you're painting with watercolor, the drawing isn't finished with the sketch. You're constantly drawing with your paint, especially if you're doing something intricate like stripes. I'm finishing up the stripes on the zebra's legs, and a lot of my pencil marks actually got lost under the paint, which is okay. If you're confident in your drawing skills and you space them nicely, it doesn't matter if they don't look exactly like the reference photo. I'm just filling in that reflection below the hind leg with black. And with the zebra finished, we are ready to do the water. This part was the fastest part of the whole painting. I start by filling in the entire shape of the reflection with clean water and then dropping in some brilliant yellow ochre. You can see in the reference photo just how yellow that shade is. Next, I'm taking rich burnt umber, fully pigmented, and dropping it in right near the legs. This is going to be the darkest portion of the reflection. You want it to appear as if the water and the legs are connected. There should be no hard line between those and really no separation in lines. So here, right up next to the muzzle, I'm trying to connect the brown water right with the nose without any perceptible break. I'm using horizontal brush strokes for the most part, but where I see reflections of the stripes on the head and in the body, I'm using more of a swooping, curvy motion with my brush. I'm not being super specific with these reflections, just squiggling my brush in a downward movement. You can put as much or as little detail in the reflections as you want. Just keep in mind that the reflections need to mirror the colors and the values that you see in the actual zebra. So where you see darker shapes like in the muzzle or where there are darker, broader stripes on the animal, try to reflect these in mirror images on the water, but using squiggly motions with your brush. This part was so much fun to paint. I allowed some of my water reflections to be wet and some are wet and dry. And once I'd had most of the shapes on, I added a few more washes just to smooth it out some more and a little more yellow ochre to make it even more vibrant. With the reflection finished, make sure that the paint is completely dry before removing your masking fluid. If you try to remove the masking fluid while the paint is wet, you're going to end up with some unwanted smudges and smears, so just be aware of that. I find that just using my clean fingers works the best, and that allows me to be able to feel the paper to see if I missed any spots. Once the masking fluid is removed, you can go in and touch up your spots. There were a couple areas that I wanted to add a little bit more texture or a little more of a rippling edge, and so I'm using my small brush and mostly burnt umber on it and just adding a few more ripples outside of that reflection. So there's our finished drinking zebra. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks so much for watching, and check out these other videos on painting African animals. We'll see you in the next one.